رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب زدني علما رب زدني علما. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Once again, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. Today we have to cover the next chapter of the story of Musa alayhi salam, and now we have entered into this major part of the story, and because by now the adventure with the Pharaoh has ended. Last time, as we have seen, that now the Bani Israel have crossed the water, Pharaoh has drowned, and now they're on the other side of the water. And now that Bani Israel have been saved, and under the leadership of Musa alayhi salam, and Musa alayhi salam, by the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he struck the staff, the water parted. And Bani Israel, all men, women, children, in hundreds of thousands, they have crossed. Pharaoh and his entire army tried to follow them, and they all got drowned. And they all got crushed, actually. And that's the first thing I want you to focus on today, because this is the part where we'll discuss that when they crossed the water, Pharaoh drowned. And this part of the story has been mentioned at these 4 places in Quran. And I took this part from Surah Taha. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions here that Pharaoh with his armies followed them. And فَأَتْبَعَهُمْ فِرْعَوْنُ بِجُنُودِهِ فَغَشِيَّهُمْ مِنَ الْيَمِّ مَا غَشِيَّهُمْ. So when Pharaoh and his army followed them, and whatever was meant to overtake them, overtook them. Apparently, it meant the waves. So the waves overtook them, and now they are done. And Pharaoh has misled his Azalla Fir'aunu qawmahu wa ma hada. And Pharaoh has misled his nation, and he didn't guide. According to Surah Shuara, Pharaoh with his host also followed the caravan, and they were on the dry part, and they were all drowned. This was again mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah as well, that it has been stated that the Bani Israel had reached the other side of the water, and they saw the Pharaoh drowning in the sea. And again in Surah Yunus, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that Pharaoh professed to believe in God while he was drowning, but this acceptance was rejected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he was told that his body would be preserved for the coming generations to serve as a lesson for them. So now, if we focus that here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned that Pharaoh is actually, he actually thought that he is guiding his nation. He thought that he's guiding his people, and he was leading them into some victory, or he was actually saving them. But rather, he actually took the most elite soldiers from his army, and he drowned all of them. He got them all killed. And that's how the character of Pharaoh concluded in Quran. So this is how the Pharaoh's character ended. And there are a few very powerful lessons that we need to reflect on because of the character of Pharaoh, because it's concluding here. So we'll take some time here to contemplate and think about the Pharaoh's character, how it was put, and what are the things that we can discuss. First of all, the most important thing is to know that all pharaohs drown. And no matter how big the empire is, no matter how strong the king is, at the end, every tyrant will be drowned. And one day, we all know that one day Napoleon Bonaparte left Egypt. One day the Algerians took back their country. The Hitler ended one day. The Sudanese, Somalians, Malays, Indonesians, all the Muslim nations that were oppressed, one day they were colonized, and the next day they took their land back. They were taken over, they were raped, they were pillaged, their resources were stolen. But one day they retook their land. They took their land back. They retook their autonomy back. And the colonizers left. The colonizer died. And the colonizer drowned. Why? Because the lesson from the story is that every tyrant will fall one. And the most important thing is, for me and you, is what was our part in the story? If our life will be a story, where are we standing? What did we do? Where was our part that we played? Were we the part of the ones who led to the fall? Or were we quietly, sitting on the sidelines watching the whole scenario going over and eating our popcorns? What is our role in the story? That's a very, very important lesson that we need to reflect on. Another lesson, the second point that actually I want to make today is to highlight, as we concluding the Pharaoh's character, is that, first of all, I would like all of you to give me 2-3 words that come in your head, that are like on the top of your head when you think about Pharaoh. What kind of person was he? I need some words from the audience.
Arrogance.
Good. 2-3
Very
words everybody.
manipulative.
Yeah, he claims that he's the only about which the Quran say that his claim was that وَقَالَ أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى.
The
So
God complex.
yeah, so his claim was that he's the God, and he has widely discussed in the Quran with his name.
Okay.
I think he was very intelligent and manipulative. So he knew what points to say when he had the dialogue with Musa alayhi salam very cleverly.
I think 2 words that might describe him. He felt he was unchallenged, that there wasn't any other power, human or divine, that really could challenge him. So he felt quite comfortable in his in what he was doing, that it wouldn't end. And the other thing was that he was very, very ruthless. He had if somebody did try to question him, he answered them with death, basically. So there's 2 things. He was ruthless, and he felt that there wasn't anybody else equal to him.
Anyone else? Any other word for him about his character? Okay, so we can take what we have up till now. So we have 2 type of characteristics basically. One is the unchallenged one, and the one who thought that he was very clever, and that we covered in the last point. That anyone who would think that no one can ever challenge me, or no one is smarter than me, all of these people, all of the human beings have to die, no matter how smart, how manipulative, how unchallenged they think they are. One day it's going to end. So I think we covered that in the previous part. In this part, I want to address the other characteristic that we just discussed, that Pharaoh has all these characteristics of arrogance. He was manipulative, he was ruthless, he had this God complex. And we are at the same page while talking about Pharaoh. We have this, whenever we think of Pharaoh, we think of a person who's heartless, a heartless tyrant. And hopelessness comes into our mind thinking about someone like Pharaoh. We think that he's someone who has no chance. Like if we read a story, we subconsciously think that, he's doomed. Pharaoh is a doomed person. There is no chance for him. But you know what fascinates me the most when I'm reading this story? The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala thought about Pharaoh as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him a chance as well. Let that sink in. I mean, he is one of the most hateful person we could ever think about. He's one of those most, heartless and, ruthless, arrogant person. Still, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is thinking about him. Allah is giving him a chance. And not just any chance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has one of his best person, one of his most favorite people, his chosen men, Musa alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sending Musa alayhi salam, his beloved prophet, he's sending him to give dawah to Pharaoh. to invite him. Even Musa alayhi salam, we read that he was fearful. He said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's like when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell him that go invite Pharaoh, he was fearful. He mentioned his fears to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then Allah told him, no, it's okay, I am with you, go. What does this story tell us? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that Allah is even thinking about Pharaoh, and had Allah wanted, he could have sent any person for the dawah, but Allah chose his best messenger and asked him to deliver the message in a best way, in a polite way. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't say that, oh, he didn't have any chance, don't waste your energy on Pharaoh, focus on other people, he's not worth it. No, Allah didn't mention that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked Musa alayhi salam specifically to go and talk to Pharaoh. Think about it. It's like someone comes to you and tell you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent me specially for you, especially for your guidance. I'm here to guide you because Allah specially sent me for you. And imagine what kind of person comes in your head, whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would send a special messenger. Who would that person be? In our head, this person would be a very pious person, because Allah is choosing to send some special message to this person. That means this person has to be very pious. He must be doing something amazing. He must have a lot of nawafils or tahajjuds or a lot of sadaqahs on his account. That's making him so special that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is choosing special message for him. And also on our part, when we consider giving dawah to someone or talking to someone about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what kind of people do we choose to talk to? When we are giving dawah, we will choose a person in whom we'll find some substance, someone who's like halfway through, or whom we think have a chance. We'll see the substance in someone, and then we'll talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that person. And here Allah is telling me that I send guidance to whoever I wish for, whoever Allah chooses to. And the most brilliant thing about this is this tells us about the free will. Free will exists. We always have a choice. Even Pharaoh had the choice. Imagine Allah gave Pharaoh all these chances from the first time of dawah, and after in those 10 years, one after the other, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was giving him chances again and again. And had he repented a single time, had he turned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a single time, he would have been forgiven. Imagine this. And I want myself and I want you to remember this, that Allah's mercy is for everyone. And we always have a chance to turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And most importantly, we also need to, there's another lesson that I was thinking for myself, that, you should never look down upon people because of their present or their past, because we don't know what future is holding. I want to share this personal story. I just got this in my mind, that I was in a mosque in France, and it was Jummah prayer. And as I entered the mosque, I found this woman. I would like to call a girl because she was pretty young. And this woman wasn't even covering her head. She wasn't even dressed up appropriately for the mosque. And I can clearly see that, she didn't even know to pray. And while I was going for Jummah prayer, because I was, just in time. So while I was walking there, I thought that, when I'll come back, maybe she needs some help. So I talked to her. Obviously, she didn't even join for Jamaat. But when I finished my prayer and while I was leaving, she was sitting at the corner of the mosque and she was crying at the prayer area. She was sitting and she was crying. And I cannot explain that in words, what I felt in my heart. She made me question my prayer and my connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I don't know why and how she ended there. But what I saw was that she received from the mosque was, it was something amazing that she was receiving from there. And I was thinking that I will guide her to prayer or something, but she was giving me something. She was giving me, more of a wake-up call than I would have given to her. And thanks to my background from Pakistan, I was thinking that had she been in Pakistan, wanting to go into the mosque with this kind of dressing without covering her head, probably no one would have allowed her to go to the mosque. And no one would have, thought that she's worth it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew that she was special. I don't know what was in her heart that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen her to be that special, but I could see that she has something special. And there are a lot of personal experiences. I'm sure that you guys must have a lot of these experiences in your head as well. But the point I'm trying to make is that we shouldn't look down upon people because of their present or their past. Like the story of Hazrat Umar bin Khattab Raziyallahu Ta'ala anhu and Abu Jahl. Both were on the single team, but one decision changed their path. Similarly, the magicians and pharaohs were on one team. Magicians saw the truth, they submitted, and Pharaoh couldn't. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Quran that Pharaoh misguided his entire nation. And all of the people following him drowned with him. Not just the Pharaoh drowned, all of those people drowned. They were very competitive people in his army. They all drowned with him. And with that, I'll make the last point about the Pharaoh's character here. That the last point that's coming in my head is that I want us to focus that these people who were following Pharaoh, what were they doing? They weren't actually, doing the active thinking. They were just going with the flow. And this scares me the most. Personally, this scares me the most. How many trends of society, family, culture, how many of the trends we follow unknowingly, without any hesitation? Because it takes a lot of energy and a lot of courage actually to do something which is not a custom. Be it homeschooling, be it a screen-free home, minimalist lifestyle, clean eating, or anything you can think of. Anything that is in the trend, everyone is doing, that is super comfortable. And it's very hard to do something which other people are not doing. I hope many of you are facing this problem these days. Because these days, there are a lot of things that are common in our society, in our families, in our friends. And if you choose to do something, for example, if you choose to make your child screen free, you don't want to buy them any games or you don't want to give them any screen time, you'll go out and you wouldn't find any company for you and your kids. And all of the things that I mentioned, all of these problems are those that when we start doing them, we'll feel ourselves alone. And I'm telling you from personal experience that it gets really difficult. It's very easy to follow the crowd. It's very easy to go with the flow. And it's very uncomfortable to choose to do the right thing. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us. No matter how hard it is, we should choose to do the right thing. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put barakah in our efforts, whatever you're doing. May Allah ta'ala put barakah in our efforts of whatever right we are trying to do. And that's a good instance. You want to add something?
No, I'm just saying Ameen to what you're saying.
Yeah, that's really, really important in my point of view. And I want this to be a reminder for myself as well, that doing the right thing looks very simple in stories while we're reading them. But in real life, it's not that obvious and easy. It's really hard. So may Allah guide us to the right path, and that we should, also pray. Remember the prayer, Allahumma arinal haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittibahu wa arinal batila batilan warzuqna ittiba'ahu. Oh Allah, show us the truth as a truth and inspire us to follow it. So when you see the truth as truth, because there are so many things that we have on our list that we wouldn't even think of doing, like for suppose there is a vast majority of Muslims who know that okay, alcohol is prohibited, so we would never think of taking alcohol. That is a red line for most of the Muslims. But there are a lot of things that are the gray areas, and we don't know what harm is it causing to us and our kids. So this is a very important dua that we should make, very frequently these days. Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'ah, so that I can see the truth and then Allah may inspire me to follow. And arina al-batila batilan warzuqna ittiba'ah, and show us the falsehood as falsehood and inspire us to abstain from it. Similarly, there are haram things that we don't even think of going close to. But still, there are a lot of wrongdoings that we don't even imagine are causing us harm. So that's why we should pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it clear for us and show us the right path. Ameen ya Rabbul Alameen. And with this, we'll move inshallah to the next chapter of Musa alayhi salam's life. And that is basically when he moved across the water. And now we have the believers of this time that we're talking about. And this part is mentioned in a lot of surahs, and we are going to discuss them one by one. First of all, Allah had them all covered. Now that they have crossed the water, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning them with Ya Bani Israel. He's talking to them directly. Ya Bani Israel, O children of Israel. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Taha mentioned that Ya Bani Israel, Qad anjaynakum min aduwikum wa aduwinakum janib at-tur al-aymana wa nazzalna alaykum al-manna was-salwa. O children of Israel, we have rescued you from the enemy. Whose enemy now? Because who's the enemy now? Because we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has rescued them from Pharaoh. So Pharaoh is actually the enemy, and he is the enemy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the people. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that we have rescued you from your enemy and our enemy, and we have taken a promise from you at the right side of the mountain. What does that mean? Do you remember this mountain? Way back when Musa alayhi salam ran from Egypt, we'll do a quick recap. Musa alayhi salam ran from Egypt, then he got married, he had a new life, and one day he was traveling with his family and he sees a fire. Where was the fire? Where did Musa alayhi salam saw the fire?
On Mount Tur.
On the mountain. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that. Now he's talking to Bani Israel. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that he has brought them through the water, and now he's brought them on the same mountain where the whole story began. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling them, now I am taking you a promise from you at the right side of the mountain. Why is the mountain so significant? Had Musa alayhi salam never been at this mountain, they would never have been freed. They would still be slaves in Egypt. And the only reason they had this freedom now is because this entire story of revelation began at that mountain. And now after all that rescue, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has brought them back at the mountain again. And this is what we call full circle. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling them that I have taken a promise from you at the side of the mountain, and I have sent down manna and salwa on you, because now they're in the desert. They've crossed the water, and now they are in the desert, and there's no vegetation in the desert. And they are going to, they may starve or dehydrate. So in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that وَزَلَّلْنَا عَلَيْكُمُ الْغَمَامَ وَأَنزَلْنَا عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَنَّ وَالسَّلْوَى كُلُوا مِن طَيِّبَاتِ مَا رَزَقْنَاكُمْ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling them that he has covered them with clouds. وَزَلَّلْنَا عَلَيْكُمُ الْغَمَامَ, and he has covered them with clouds, and it's like a divine umbrella which is following them. And they wouldn't be so that, it's really hot in the desert. So the umbrella of clouds would cover them so they wouldn't be scorched by the sun. And it would also give them rain and shade. And since they didn't have food, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them grain so that they could grow in the desert. That's called man. And there were birds that wouldn't fly away when they would try to, catch them or eat them. That's called salwa. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had their proteins and carbs and the hydration covered. All the essential nutrients are done. And then their regular water supply, one water was coming from the clouds, and for their regular water supply, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given them 12 springs of water. The rock that broke up and, they were given 12 springs. This is also mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah. وَإِذِ Musa liqaumihi, when Musa alayhi salam asked for water for his people, فَقُلْنَا, so we said, إِذْرِبْ بِعَصَاكَ الْحَجَرَ, struck the rock with your staff. فَانْفَجَرَتْ مِنْهُ اثْنَتَا عَشَرَ عَيْنٍ. So 12 springs of water came out of that rock. قَدْ عَلِمَ كُلُّ أُنَاسٍ مَشْرَبَهُمْ كُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا مِنْ رِزْقِ اللَّهِ وَلَا تَعْثَوْا فِي الْأَرْضِ مُفْسِدِينَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling them, that know your drinking place and eat and drink from the sustenance provided to you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and do not go about acting wickedly on the earth and spreading mischief. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given them all the things that they need to survive after crossing was done. And now Allah is making its brief reference. This was Surah Al-Baqarah, in which it's mentioned in detail. And in Surah Taha, this is mentioned in, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing to that. Ya Bani Israel, Israela kad anjaynakum min aduwikum wa aduvinakum janibat Turil Aymani munazzalna alaykum al-manna was-salwa. So Allah ta'ala is pointing that again in Surah Taha. I'll repeat, we rescued you from the enemy, and we took promise from you at the side of the mountain, and we have given you manna and salwa. Meaning that we have not only given you freedom, but we have given you all the resources that are required by you to survive in this desert. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not only giving them a free life, but then He is providing them things to survive as well. And then Allah is telling them to eat from the good and pure we have provided you. What has Allah ta'ala provided? In the next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, Kulu min tayyibati ma razaqnakum. Eat from the good and pure we have given them, wala tatghaw fihi, and don't transgress in it. So what has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided them?
Sustenance with the with their food.
Yeah, we can count these sustenance on hand. Manna, salwa, water.
3, and the covering, the shade from the hot sun.
Yeah.
So it was like their basic needs, so relieve them from the tyranny of the Pharaoh, and now they've been provided without having to do any physical labor for it. It was just given to them. Maybe they weren't used to such luxury.
Yeah. Go ahead, please. So actually, I want to set the stage for what we are going to read about Bani Israel's story after crossing the water. But because whenever we read the story, there is a large context of the story in Surah Al-Baqarah, and there are, I think, more than 90 or 70 ayahs in Surah Al-Baqarah, which only talk about Bani Israel and after the parting of the sea. And when we are reading those ayahs, on the first glimpse, what we think is that, it's very easy for us to criticize them, and we think of them as people of ingratitude. But I think this is a reminder for you and me that stories in Quran, specifically the part where Bani Israel is mentioned, it's very easy to get carried away. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned that all these things as a lesson for us. Instead of thinking, what worse people they were, or, they were people of ingratitude. Let's try to contemplate and reflect what made them do this. What made them these people? And how did they reach there? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us these stories as a lesson. It's not like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to know that, oh, they are bad people, you should have this on this list. No, this story and story of Musa alayhi salam is mentioned, it's repeated so many times in Quran, because this is something that we need to go back to again and again, and we need to learn from these stories again and again. Because, they are the believers of the time. They were the believers. They were the people for which the water was parted. So they came across the water as believers. And what happened to those believers is very important for you and me to understand. Because you remember last time when we read the ayah, Musa alayhi salam, when these people complained Musa alayhi salam that, we were oppressed because before you were here and we are still getting oppressed. There's no difference you have made in our lives. And what Musa alayhi salam told them, he said that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to destroy your enemy. And he's going to make you the ruler of the land. And at that time, when we were reading the story and when Bani Israel was listening to it, it was like, when will that happen? Right now, we are facing the same difficulties. It's been 10 long years. We are still stuck with the same situation. So 10 years were long for them. And they were like, they were tortured in those 10 years. But Musa alayhi salam was telling them that this time will pass. And then you'll be made the rulers of the land. What is important? فَيَنْظُرْ كَيْفَ تَعْمَلُونَ. So when you'll be ruler of the land, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will see how you will act. And now that's time. That's the time. Now they have this life of freedom. And now it's their time to act. So if you're understanding the point that I'm trying to make here is that those 10 years, they looked like they were years of torture, but they were not only being tortured, they were being trained in those 10 years to make their iman strong. And after this torture, what difference are you making, at this time? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling them at that time they had to do the sabr because they were being tortured and they were prepared for the upcoming task and challenge. And now that they have crossed the water, now it's the time for their gratitude, shukr, and their action. So if we put like ourselves in their situation and imagine, this first ni'mah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them sustenance in the form of manna, salwa, and water. And if you put yourself in their situation, imagine you woke up in the morning and you turn to your mom and ask, what is for the breakfast? And she told you that it's manna and salwa. Okay, so what we are having for lunch? Salwa and manna. And if you are not in the, mood of salwa, you can have manna. And if you don't want to eat manna, you have salwa. There's nothing else. No chutney, no sauce, no ketchup, no fries, no salt and pepper, no salad, no dressing. You don't even have fries on the side. You have nothing else, manna and salwa. Nothing. You have got the same food over and over for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. And if you're in the mood of drinking something, there's only water. There's no juice, no fruit, nothing else. That's the exact same kind of food. And in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the lack of bread. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that وَإِذْ قُلْتُمْ يَا مُوسَى لَن نَّصْبِرَ عَلَىٰ طَعَامٍ وَاحِدٍ. You said to Musa alayhi salam that we will not, compromise on one sort of food, one kind of food all the time. فَادْعُ لَنَا رَبَّكَ. So pray to your Lord. That's very important to mention. فَادْعُ لَنَا رَبَّكَ. So pray for us to your Lord. يُخْرِجْ لَنَا مِمَّا تُنْبِتُ الْأَرْضُ مِنْ بَقَلِهَا وَكِسْرَائِهَا وَفَوْمِهَا وَعَدَسِهَا وَبَصَلِهَا. This is all the grocery list they wanted. So pray to your Lord to bring us from whatever the earth produces, its herbs, cucumber, corns, lentils, garlic, and onion. So Allah mentions that they got tired of eating the same food. They were tired of eating the same food. And what I just mentioned is that we get tired of wearing the same cardigan for 20 days straight. If you and me have the same dinner for 3 days straight in a row, you'll start giving your wife or your mom the look. We cannot eat the same food straight for a week. In this day and age, we would not even eat the ghar ka khana, the homemade food, for a whole month. We would like to go out and eat. So before we point out fingers to Bani Israel saying, oh, Nashukriya people of ingratitude, Allah gave them manna, salwa, Allah gave them food that came from the skies, and yet they are being unthankful and ungrateful. We need to look at ourselves first. And if you are with me until now, why do you think this happened? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why is Allah giving them this reaction? Why is the reaction so hard? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, أَتَسْتَبْدِلُونَ الَّذِي هُوَ أَدْنَى بِالَّذِي هُوَ خَيْرٌ. This means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking them, do you want to take in exchange of do you want to take a meaner thing in exchange of a better thing? There's a low class thing that you're asking for instead of a better thing. But what we have discussed so far, it doesn't look like that. So there must be something more than it in this ayah, no? Are you with me so far? We grew up listening to this story that, Bani Israel are the people of ingratitude because the food was coming to them from the skies, but still they were being ungrateful. So help me understand this. What is the reason for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying so?
I think when they were under the Pharaoh's oppression, they were being tested. The whole spirit, their iman, their strength, their perseverance, their sabr, it was tested. And so I think their iman was higher under the oppression, but when that's taken away and they're just their iman's no longer and then the weaknesses start to come out. They were stronger when they were under the oppression because they were resilient, they were they were combating. But now it's like life is too slow for them, and if they've lost that combat, so they turn to these side of human nature, being ungrateful. They're more ungrateful now than they were when they were under the Pharaoh's oppression. So they're not striving. When you're striving, your whole senses are alive. But there's no strive for them now. They're not the springs. They've got their own tribal, 12 tribes. Each one has their own water. They've got shade. There's no push in life. If you put yourself in their life, is slowed down. They've been brought to this part of the land near the mountain, and there's so many of them, and there's a huge 12 tribes. And Musa alayhi salam came forward, to rescue them, or first of all challenge, do dawah to Pharaoh. And even in that, to me, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, now when we look at Musa alayhi salam is one of the 5 greatest prophets. So he's great. We see his greatness when he's gone through all those tests. So it was as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was preparing us to count him as one of the greatest pharaohs. But in his greatness, he had to go through so many challenges, so many And again, for him, this is a challenge when his own people, Bani Israel, are now, you know, they have no focus. I think they've lost. So things, the whole story is going to yet evolve and more things are going to happen. But at this point of time, you know, point where they are, they just, they don't appreciate what they have.
Okay. No, I get your point. You're saying that since they don't have anything, any activity in life, so now they are being ungrateful because they don't have anything to do. So I partially agree to that, and I would make my point that you know, it's very easy in life to become ungrateful for the things, you know, lack of gratitude. We need to understand where the lack of gratitude comes from, because you know, for some people, having having dessert with every food is a luxury they can't afford. And for some people, having only one option for dessert is like they want more. So there is a difference of the level of you know, things that we have for the sake of ingratitude. But let's try to understand this, that when the Bani Israel used to live in Egypt, what was their status in Egypt? Were they free or they were slaves? They were actually slaves. So when they were slaves, they had all these vegetables, lentils, garlic, onion, cucumbers. They had all this stuff, right? So they had a variety of food to eat, but that food came with a life of slavery. Now that they are free, they don't have a variety of food option. Their food is, you know, there's no menu or their dishes on manna and salwa. But the point is that they are free. So some of them started saying to Musa alayhi salam, can you make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? I miss the old food from Egypt. I miss some of the old food from Egypt, like, you know, min bakaliha, wa kisaiha, wa fawmiha. So here's the list of groceries. Apparently, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes to listen to your prayers because he parted the water for you. So can you pray to him to arrange this a bit of salad for us and stuff?
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
Yes. So, what I have read until now is that the man and salwa is something that grows in the desert, and the Bani Israel, they used to eat that food without any effort, as you're mentioning that. The main thing is that they have had that food in the desert. Allah is granting them in the desert with the basic needs of their life. Allah has granted them with the water in that place, with the food, because it's very unusual that in a desert there is water, and it's also very unusual that in the desert we can see some food that is growing, because the thing is that there is an ayah in the Quran which explains that all the risk that Allah is granting to the human beings is actually for that risk, the word that the Quran has used is anzala, means that is coming down from the sky. So this is the point that I want to add. And also in the second part of this ayah is that's much important, that ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ كَانُوا يَكْفُرُونَ بِآيَاتِ اللَّهِ. The main thing is that now they were demanding something. What does it mean? It means that they are denying the ayat of Allah. These are the signs, clear signs. These are the ayat of Allah that He's showing to the Banu Israel in the desert. So they are actually denying and doing, we can say, the kufr. Means denying. They are doing the not. They were not doing the shukr of Allah. They were not saying the Alhamdulillah that we have these things in the desert. It's a very big sign. But they, instead of saying Alhamdulillah, they are now denying the ayat of Allah and demanding something. So that's the reason that they have that zillah and maskana on them. So that's from my side.
That basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them manna and salwa, which was, you know, unusual food, and they were like completely taken care of. But that's human nature, that you get bored of this eating the same thing again and again. So they start, oh, I miss the old food. And the old food was like the old life of prison. So when they're saying that, uh, since they are in comfort now, so now they are sitting and talking about, I mean, I miss the tuna sandwich. Imagine you were in prison and you say that I miss the tuna sandwich from the prison, which means that you can wish you have it right now. So that means that you are missing the life that you had in prison, because the memory of that food it's not bringing you the memory of the humiliation you had at that time. You're comfortable recalling that time. Rather, you miss that time. So this was actually a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that, okay, you have freedom, but the freedom comes at the cost of something. And the cost of something was to get out of your comfort zone. And that is the price of your freedom. They have only one food to eat, and yet they have to serve it. When they, and this was I believe this was a test from them, for them, this manna and salwa, the only food they could, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have given them more options, but giving this limitation in the food was actually a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because when they told Musa alayhi salam they miss the present food actually, so they said that they are missing the foods. That means that they don't have this capability, that they could appreciate the freedom. They couldn't appreciate the taste of freedom actually. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said them in Surah Taha that eat from the good and pure we have provided you. The good and pure things can be bland. They cannot be very tasteful in the, they might not be very enjoyable to your tongues. But you know what's so amazing about this simple bland food? That it comes with the freedom. It's coming with the dignity. They don't have to, now that they are free. And I'm pointing, I'm mentioning this point again, that this single menu food, manna and salwa only, this might sound a little boring to them, but now they're not living like animals. They don't have to be treated like worthless, pathetic creatures, and they are owned by other creatures. They don't have to live a life of humiliation, where the soldiers can just walk into their homes and kill their boys and let their women live. The young men had to watch their women, their mothers, their sisters being mistreated on the streets by Egyptian soldiers under the Pharaoh's rule. And worst thing, they were unable to stand up against it. They don't have now, the food might be boring, but they don't have the life of helplessness and humiliation anymore. They are free. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling them directly that eat from the good and pure things we have provided you and don't rebel in it. And now we need to look into a little into what is this rebel in food. And how do you rebel in food? Allah is saying that when I give you blessing, don't get drowned in the bliss. Because when we have some blessing, we start getting comfortable in that bliss. Whenever we have something in our life, some blessing that you were thankful of, when you get it, you start getting used to it in a year or 2 years. When you bought your first car, you were really happy about it, but after 2 or 3 years, it looks like an old car now. So now you're not thankful about it. Rather, you want something new. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us this principle, that when we are given the blessings over and over again, we start getting comfortable with the blessing and we start taking them for granted. And once you start taking the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for granted, what happens is we start feeling entitled. And when this entitlement comes, we start disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all kinds of things. And this is actually a very interesting formula that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about in Quran at many places. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has talked about this problem with other nations as well. That where does the journey of ingratitude begin? Ingratitude begins when you start belittling your blessings. This is a very interesting phenomenon, rather, that when you start looking at the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in modern terms, this term is called glimmers. You know, the modern people call it glimmers. Glimmers are actually the smallest, very small, tiny blessings that you start noticing. And when you start noticing that these small blessings in your life, you would start seeing more blessings. So this is also practice that so the whole purpose is to appreciate blessings. Because counter what happens is when you start belittling your blessings, when you start ignoring them, and you start taking them for granted, then you start feeling entitled. And entitlement is basically the virus which spreads. And when you start feeling entitled for anything, then you start being ungrateful. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about in Quran at various places. And the next chapter is a little longer, so we'll discuss about that in the next session, inshallah. But there's a small exercise that we can do. There is a term called al-mutarafin. Al-mutarafin. These are the people that are mentioned in Quran, and these are the people who live large, basically. So if they want to have meal, they want to have a feast. If they want to go on a vacation, boating, they would take an entire entourage. So if you go at their wedding, there are these fancy wedding in which every person is given a diamond ring or something, or these are the people basically who have this extravaganza in their life. So what are these mutarafin people, and what do Allah talk about them in Quran? We can research about them, and because this extravaganza in life, this is basically another problem that we are dealing with in our lives. So this is a little on the side note, but we can look into these people and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about these people in Quran. So right now we are closing at this. We will discuss the further in and what are the places in Quran, because this ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling them, so they were constantly denying the ayahs of Allah. And this wasn't just one place, they were constantly doing it. In which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentioned, right now, up till now, they have only talked, we just learned about manna and salwa. What happened later in their future? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also talking about this, because the same habit, this is the same virus which led to all these things, which led to the denial of ayahs, which led to the, these denial of ayahs, and then further killing. This, like in the form of, you can say a domino effect, or you can say this is a virus that caused all these problems. So we need to be very careful about this, and whenever we read the ayahs of Quran, we need to take a lesson out of them, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help me and you understand them and make them a part of our lives. Barakallahu li wa lakum fil Quran wa nafa'ani wa iyyakum bi ayati